Welcome to the MMIA podcast. My name's Joanne Avison, and I'm delighted to be here with my dear friend and colleague, Paul Thornley. Hi, Paul.
Hi, Joanne. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. And we're going to talk today about a question that comes up in our live coaching calls quite a lot. And that question is around muscle trembling. Is muscle trembling a good thing? Is muscle trembling a bad thing? Or is muscle trembling a sign of something that we should be listening to? So let's dive deep into the signs of overtraining. And let's ask the question, can we push our own limits without crossing the line into overtraining? So before we go into this, I'm just going to read a little piece from a review of individual and team sports that found out, as a scientific set of statistics, that 42%, I'm quite staggered by that, Paul, 42% of athletes in individual sports and 33% of athletes in team sports experience what's called overuse injuries. That is like a third and something nearing a half of individual sports. So that's like a very significant percentage.
Joanne, what is the scientific explanation for an overuse injury?
What you mean as in the definition?
Yeah, the explanation. Yeah, from science-based evidence malarkey.
Overuse injury, and I quote, is an injury without a specific and identifiable event associated with its onset. I guess by that they mean a specific sprain or something actually, an impact. So I'll carry on. It results from the cumulative process of tissue damage rather than instantaneous energy transfer, which causes a repetitive microtrauma and overload in the musculoskeletal system that would not result in injury if the affected tissue had sufficient time to recover.
Mm-hmm.
Thus, overuse injuries can cause long-term negative consequences that decrease an athlete's performance, causing pain and dysfunction, and in some cases could end an athlete's career. Considering that athletes often do not have proper time to recover between training sessions and competitions, overuse injuries might be highly prevalent in sports. Now, I don't know about you, Paul, but I think it's more than just sports. It's all of us doing sports, our weekend warriors, our class participants, and all sorts of people build in this overuse injury without necessarily realizing it. So let's just consider, how do we recognize the signs? Can we highlight what the signs of overtraining are? And in this article that I just quoted from, they talk about the musculoskeletal system. But of course, we know what we're talking about is the neuromyofascial system. We could say neuromyo-osseofascial system, basically the whole integrated body architecture. And with a keynote on what we get asked by our movement teachers, what happens when I start trembling? So what would you say is the most common misconception around this idea?
Well, I think it's very straightforward, really. I don't think it's complicated for the general audience. The expectation of exercise is it should be strenuous. It should be strenuous to the point where you're struggling to encourage progression and adaptation of your tissues, so you change shape, get stronger ultimately, and hopefully that will address everybody's needs to move and perform well. But as we know, and as we have this conversation daily, don't we? Exercise done repetitively with not being aware of the consequences of your approach often results in these limitations and restrictions and damages to your living tissue, which is why we have a rehabilitation world, which is $1 trillion industry. So your general audience is not aware of the consequences because they're not used to understanding what they're doing or have an expectation of learning the skill or the movement or whatever they're joining in. They just want to take part and do it. And of course, in just doing it and not understanding how they achieve it, they just fall into the trap of copying, pasting what the instructors encourage them to do, or trying to mimic the nearest person to them, or try to emulate somebody else who is significantly better than them and more accomplished, and they try to rush the achievement of success through exercise.
Well,
And
that keyword rush that you've just used there,
yeah,
I think that's really important there because there's two things. One, even if we're not trying to do it quickly, we tend to want to achieve as soon as possible. So the idea that the more you train, the quicker you'll get the results. You're talking about changing shape and improving time and improving effort. You know, if it's swimming, it's strokes per length. If it's running, it's strides per mile, especially when you get to elite athletics where you and I see extensive injury
yep.
accumulation. Another discussion in a minute. But before we get to that, do you think there's also a common misconception in training that more is better?
Well, it's not that more is better, it's more effort equates to a better outcome. And the harder they feel it, the more challenging and complex they're doing something, then it must be doing them good. And in the vast majority of cases, people are taking part in movement opportunities in different modalities that are out there, in different classes and different teaching environments, and they're not capable. They've not reached the skill level yet to benefit from the movement that's being offered to them. And of course, just with this innate want to take part and be there, be part of the group and have that feel-good factor of exercising, which it does give us, right? People love, they get quite addicted to it. It often they compromise their structural integrity to achieve the movement that's on offer. And then they do that repetitively and they get too involved in getting to the end goal too fast instead of realizing it's a journey. It's a journey of adaptation and exploration of themselves and their own particular form and how their particular tissues perform in that particular given environment. Because not two people move the same way in the same environment. It might be same, but different, but there is definitely significant differences to each individual.
So when we get to this idea of recognizing that a particular person, say it's me and I'm doing something and it's too much for me,
Right.
how do I recognize those signals? Do you think, and let's look at muscle trembling particularly, that we are overriding the body's basic signals? Now, because we talk about MMIA, it stands for myofascial magic in action. And when we talk about that magic, what we're talking about is really a metaphor for a recognition of your signals, right? You read the signal, you read it accurately, you put it into action. And I don't want to over intellectualize it because I think you start to intellectualize the actual living experience, which is all very interesting from a scientific point of view, but it's not very interesting from an experiential point of view because it comes down to a feeling.
Yep.
And that feeling, what we're saying is a signal, and that signal can be overridden. Now, when it comes to trembling, we have a feeling like, whoops, and suddenly the tissue is trembling. Would you say that you've already taken yourself to the limit and that trembling is worth it? Is it making you stop or should you go through it? Because I think there's a common misconception that when we experience muscle trembling very clearly, that we're demonstrating, this is what I've heard, we're demonstrating that we've reached our limit and we should keep the body at that limit. Have you heard that, or that we should override that?
No, yeah, I've heard exactly that. The common explanation for tremoring is the body is now recruiting, and in the process of recruiting, more muscular receptors to perform the task. And given your ability to tolerate the tremor for long enough over a significant period of time, your body will adapt. It will recruit enough of these mechanoreceptors to move the muscle and make it stronger, and you'll cease tremoring. This is the general take from the dictionary and from Google. Now, I suggest that tremoring is like being thirsty. Once you feel thirsty, you are already dehydrated.
Yeah.
When your body starts to tremor, you've already reached the body's natural threshold of feeling safe. And when you start to tremor, it's the body's way of warning you that your body doesn't have the ability and the tissues don't have the characteristics that enable them to manage the force that you're trying to cope with in the direction you're going, or the speed or tempo or intensity that you're taking part within. And it is looking for reinforcements that will not come, because we understand the nature and the physiological understanding of living tissue at varying positions within us. So although there are no layers like there are in a cake, where we can say this is the deepest level and this is the mid-level and this is the most superficial level, although there are not distinct layers just like you made a cake, there are distinct positions that tissues reside within us, even though they coexist and collaborate together. And we know that the tissues closest to the skeletal bones are known as the whisperers, which is why we teach people to become fascial whisperers. So they recognize that the conversation, that signal, that feeling, that they're capable of managing you and subtly whispering to manage movement that's to be anticipated and manage the beginning of. And they take time to refine and recognize that you could hear them. But people are so desperate to hear something and feel something that they work harder and they override the subtle and the eloquent nature of these tissues to get to the bigger, more broader, more talking in a loud, projecting manner. These tissues live slightly further away from the skeletal system, and the way they're configured and their characteristics are not to stabilize the skeletal motion. They're there to manage motion that's already begun.
Yeah.
And their job is to guide you through movement, yes, but not refine the movement.
Yes.
And unfortunately, once those refining tissues that are closest to the skeletal system become ignored, or they become inhibited because of lack of awareness of how to utilize them and stimulate them in a timely fashion, these next level tissues become responsible for a job they're not qualified for, they don't have the characteristics to do well, and in the wrong location. And when they become dysfunctional, they shake. And they shake to let you know that you've gone beyond your body's form and its ability to perform in that particular threat scenario.
Brilliant. Brilliantly said. And so what I think then happens is we get all sorts of signs of decreased performance, right?
Yes.
We get the effort requires more, we get sweatier, we get anxious. And I think there's a mistake in thinking that vigorousness in exercise or close sequences that are done together, like lots of training every single day, actually costs vitality. And we know through research onto collagen synthesis and collagen deficit that it actually takes about 30 hours for the tissue to the soft tissue to completely recover. And I think this is where, I've experienced a lot with young athletes, particularly females, for example, where they demonstrate this, what I think is fatigue or insufficient recovery. They demonstrate it in a multitude of ways. They become anxious. That's one thing. For the girls, sometimes menstruation stops. They find their academic studies, they're in a sports college for some reason or other, or a school that specializes in their sport, and they find themselves sort of struggling with the academic side of things. And I've just seen this cycle of anxiety that I see go away when you say to them, you are literally not resting enough between sessions and you're pushing your body to this level of fatigue. And it's shown by this critical sign of muscle trembling under certain circumstances. So you're going to say, stop it or modify, or what? What are you going to say to people, what they do with that?
I want them to recognize it. And I want them to respect that the body is being very clear to them. It is not an invitation to push harder. It is an awareness they pushed hard enough. And where they're at, they need to recognize, how did I get here? And this is the whole point about body and instinctive and intuitive movement. You must understand you and recognize where your limitations are and where your opportunities are directed, where you have the potential to go and thrive in your own ability. But it's this need to meet the match of the herd, to copy your friends and your colleagues and be as good at or as competitive or put as much effort in. Instead of saying it's okay to not do that. It's okay to recognize my limitations and my bias and my preference, but understand where the route I took to get to where my body told me I was threatening it. Because I want you to see tremoring as the natural body's way of offering you an awareness. Like if you see anything in the world, if the temperature changes, you start to tremor. You know you need to go put a jacket on or change the temperature. You know we're a warm-blooded body. We're designed to be warm and fluid and feel comfortable in ourselves, in our own skin. But if we feel frightened, if we feel cold, if we feel threatened, if we feel uncomfortable, your skin literally vibrates. The hairs on the back of your neck prop up. Yes, you shiver. Yes, you tremble when you're in a position that is not comfortable, and it creates anxiety within, whether you're aware of it or not. However, we change that, we blind that, and we turn that natural survival instinct of the human body when we call it exercise and go, well, we'll ignore that signal and we'll call it a beneficial outcome. And we'll use that as a barometer for success.
Which is not.
Well, it can't be, right? Because if exercise was so good and all of these elite athletes have access to the best rehabilitation and recovery strategies in the world, why did they all retire in the mid-30s?
Great big question.
But they take their bodies to the limit. They push it beyond this actual natural boundary to be successful in a very sport-specific environment. And that's good. We need them because they entertain us. But our general population base our long-term strategies for life and health and vitality on their short-term successes. And that's where we make a mistake.
Well said. So let's summarize the points that we've made.
Yes.
What we're saying is, when trembling occurs, it's a signal of either you're in a position that's not suitable for your body, you've done too much, you need to rest, change shape, do something else. The trembling is a signal to stop, not push through. And what we're suggesting then is that we build this subtle ability over time that's unique to each one of us, that one size doesn't fit all, but that trembling tells you that your size isn't the one that fits you, right?
Correct. And it's that where it really comes down to that understanding of the micro management of micro movements that allow you to understand the sequencing that you bypassed or overrode, yes, if that's the right expression, to achieve an overwhelming performance with your body. Whereas if you backtrack slightly and you recognize that you missed out one of the dominoes in the line, if you like, and you keep hopping over and skipping the sequence, then you keep inviting dysfunctional patterning where the body will naturally defend itself, which is what ultimately leads to overstrains, stressful scenarios, limitation, rehabilitation. Whereas if we can identify these opportunities to go, that's the one, that's the bit I keep missing out. Let's not make it more complex and more intensified. Let's reduce the intensity. Let's make it simpler than the complexity that got me here. So it allows me to pay attention to that missing link within my sequence, where it allows me to understand and navigate the body and the motion through my opportunity without getting to the point where I shake and tremor.
And it's actually, and just to kind of wrap this, I think this is where we bump into our specialists talk about this a lot. The client says, oh, but if it's not hard, it's not benefiting me. So we take them back to a place where these simple micro movements seem like they're not doing anything, but actually they're building that threshold in a very subtle way over time, aren't they?
They're incredibly powerful. And it's literally is the missing information in the healthcare and medical world. It's like if you never fine-tune it, if the orchestra never chose to tune their instruments, they just kept playing them. And over time, within 1 month of performing every day, then somebody would be more out of tune than the other element within the orchestra. And the conductor would get tired. He wouldn't give himself time to recover. So he wasn't able to organize and refine and pay attention and let somebody know that they need to speed up or slow down. And we had the very same set of massive complex systems that must harmonize together. And sometimes we ask them to overload one area and one system into support of another one that's not functioning as easily and as appropriately. And that's because we forget to refine and recover from our exertions. We just keep asking ourselves to be exerted. And it's not wrong. It's brilliant to push ourselves sometimes. But you must allow your body to enjoy the fact that you pushed it. give it time to recover, refine it, and make sure you reestablish the optimal scenario and sequences within it so it can perform again later without having to hide or mask a limitation that they created along the way. And it just takes time and it takes patience, and then it will do the most remarkable things for them more often than they expect. Rather than only training and only performing until you can't, prepare your body to perform optimally more often than you expect to do.
Yeah. And just spend a little tiny bit of time tuning it.
Tune it every day, and it will perform
Love
every
it.
day for you.
So we'd love to hear from you, your experiences of overtraining or any questions that you might have about it. And we're not suggesting that nobody pushes themselves to their limits. We are suggesting that rather than working an hour a week to your limits, you do lots of micro movement opportunities. Take care, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, man. Bye, Paul.